I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're taking a deep dive into an important book. It is called The Adventures of the COVID Hunter. It is an extraordinary medical biography by Dr. Joseph Varon. This gripping memoir presents a first-hand account of a doctor's courageous battle on the front lines of the COVID-19 pandemic. It offers a unique and deeply personal perspective on one of the most challenging times in recent history. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his wonderful book. The links are below this interview. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Let's turn back the hands of time. It is March, April 2020, and the pandemic is just going into high gear very, very quickly. Where are you? What are your responsibilities? And what's it like being in the trenches?
Well, I mean, it's something that I don't wish on anybody, not even on my worst enemy, because you are in a situation where you have the unknown. You have a situation where you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if you yourself are going to make it home that same day, if you're going to get this illness that is so obscure that we don't know too much about it. So at the time, I'm the chief of intensive care at United Memorial Medical Center. I'm the chief of staff. And, I'm confronted with an illness that nobody wants to see. No doctor wants to get close to a patient that has this. Patients are dying, dying one after the other. And we really need to do something to get these people to survive. So, I have skills in critical care. I have skills in management. I have skills in pulmonary medicine. I have several specialties. I said, well, somebody has to do this. So we start working with these patients. And we start working to the point, I'm sure you've read that I work 715 continuous days without a single day off. Some days I would work 20 hours, other days I would work 16 hours. It was probably the most difficult time of my life. Not even as an intern, I used to work as much.
Yeah. It's amazing. And like you said, you are there and the threat is very, very real. You're working with a disease that you know little to nothing about. It's a novel virus that is infecting people. The people who are struck ill with this illness are very, very sick. I know a friend of mine is an anesthesiologist in Massachusetts. I recommended he retire because I didn't want to see him in that situation. It's a tough situation to be in. What pulled you through? How did you get through? How did you put aside your fear and focus more on the patient than your own well-being?
I think that I thought to myself, I said, look, Joe, you became a doctor for a reason, to help people. And somebody has to help them. Yeah. I was working in an inner city hospital, where you have a lot of minorities, a lot of communities of color. People that if I didn't care for them, nobody was going to care for them, and they were just plainly going to die. So I have to do it. How did I pull through? How was I able to work so many days? I still don't know. To date, I don't know how I was able to do this. The amount of physical tiredness that I would have was unreal, and yet the next day I would be there. It was nonstop. I was very lucky that I had a lot of people that looked at what we were doing. For one thing, I had the lowest mortality rate of the entire country, where the rest of the country had mortality rates in the 40%. Mine was 4.4. We were thinking a lot outside the box, and we were trying things. Even though we were trying medications that are FDA approved, we were trying things. We were trying to deal with this illness. At some point in time, if you remember, it was a political illness. It was not a real illness. You either were pro this or pro that. It was crazy. So I had to pull through. And one of the ways to pull through was to, for example, I would keep the number of days that I had been working, and you saw in the book, I have pictures of me with numbers. We decided to create a music video just to get my nurses who would come to me in the middle of the day crying because many patients had died. We have to do something. And that's the only way that I guess I coped, and this coping actually worked, and we were able to both survive and to save many, many people.
Your mortality rate was better than many, many institutions. What do you feel you guys did differently? What was the innovation you used? Did you turn to ventilators less? Tell us a little bit. Give us a little insight on how you were able to save as many lives.
When these things happened, one of the things that we did is we created an alliance, 5 of us in different parts of the country. we would, talk at 3 o'clock in the morning, come up with, hey, why don't we try this? Why don't we try the good old vitamin C, for example? We started to realize that a lot of people were dying that had low vitamin D levels. We said, oh, maybe we should do that. We did try ivermectin, that I'm sure you remember was very controversial for a period of time, and says, hey, it works. Now, at the same time that we were having all that success, make no mistake, I was having death threats at my office every single day. People telling me that tomorrow you're not going to survive. And that was one of the reasons why I decided to write the book. Because I said, people need to know what we really went through. I mean, it's not just the medical part, but what about the emotions? What was going on in these things? What we were doing was working, yet, you had all this political push to use one medication or another medication or stuff like that. And there was a lot of, I call it, there was no homogeneous message. You could hear the former president say one thing, Dr. Fauci said another thing and then changed his mind 5 times. The CDC said one thing, the FDA say another thing. I would come out in a bunch of interviews and say something different. People didn't know who to believe. And by the time they came to the hospital, they were near death. So it was chaotic, to say the least.
Right. So people are actually delaying medical care because it had been so politicized. They didn't think it was going to be as bad as it was. They were angry with you for trying certain medications that, in your opinion, were effective. It's a horrible situation to be in. What was the turning point? Was it the vaccine, or was exposure to the virus building some kind of herd immunity? We heard a lot about herd immunity. Did we finally get to that point? Was it the vaccine bring us there, or were we there already, in your opinion?
From the very beginning, I told people, in this world, there are 2 kinds of people: those who have COVID and those who are going to get COVID. So basically, we all were going to get it. Whether you got it natural exposure or whether somebody gave you the shot, that was going to do it. Now, we, at the beginning, in all fairness and to be transparent, I was the first one to say, give me the shot, give me the shot, give me the shot, because people were dying. But then we started to learn that the shots probably were not doing the trick. And to date, we are seeing that they are really not as effective as we thought they were, and they do have a lot of issues. That was one of the things of COVID. We kept on changing. Whereas you remember that at the very beginning, in March of 2020, the governor of New York was saying, please get us ventilators, get our ventilators. Well, we realized that ventilating people was not a good idea. 88% of people that were on a mechanical ventilator, on a respirator, would die. So we started to come up with a lot of unique techniques. We would flip the patients like hotcakes to get them to oxygenate better. So we did a lot of really cool things based on science. But like I said, there was a lot of resistance from the medical community, from the general community, from the pharmaceutical industry. I mean, it was a nightmare. So that's why I thought that I had to put that in writing and tell people, look, this is what happened in my little unit where I was caring for all of these patients. You need to read it so that you see what happened, not what you see on TV, not what you see, because everything, I will tell you, everything was being edited. My unit was featured in pretty much every news station in the world, and they would come in, we would tell them what we were doing, and then when the report would come out, everything was edited. They would never mention about, the things that we were doing using certain medications. So that's why I said, okay, well, it's my turn to go ahead and start telling people what really happened in these units.
Right. Well, I think it's a great service that you're giving people a firsthand account without it being edited by somebody else who might have an agenda, which is unfair to the reader. So I think it's great that you do have this book out there. It seems like a post-mortem on COVID-19 hasn't been done yet. We don't really seem to realize who died. Was it mostly old people, mostly people with pre-existing conditions, people who were going to die anyway, and it just hastened their death? When you look back now, was this a crisis that really threatened every one of us with death, or was it a crisis that threatened vulnerable communities with death?
Well, I mean, there is no question that most of the people that died were those who had some, comorbidity, some other issue, other illnesses that were poorly controlled. But I will tell you, I did see those who were perfectly healthy that died. I saw entire families dying. I mean, it was one of the worst things that you could say. Now, like you said, we have not really done a postmortem on what really happened. And one week you see one study that shows something, and then the next week you see another one that says the complete opposite. I think that we did blow this out of proportion to what it was. And the main reason is that there was no homogeneous message. If all of these people that had so many different interests would have sat together, I think that we would not have lost as many people as we did. Because a lot of people died because they got to the hospital late. Because there were 3 reasons why people didn't go to the hospital. The first one was that they would say, if I go to a hospital, I'm going to die in the hospital. The second one was, if I go to the hospital, they're going to kill me in the hospital. And the third one was, if I go to a hospital, I'm going to lose an arm and a leg because it's going to be very expensive. So people delayed going to the hospital. They were concerned that they were going to get COVID if they went to the hospital. So we lost our heart attack patients. We lost our patients with chronic lung diseases, your asthmatics, people that did not gotten care because everything was shut down. Those shutting down the entire country didn't help us.
Yeah. As we look back now, we realize that mistakes were made, and this was highly politicized. But people like yourself were putting it all on the line. And we thank you for your service, because it really was like wartime. Every physician I've spoken to has told me they've a similar experience. They put in 12, 15, 20 hours a day without any days off. And the same horrifying stories, they call me up, they're like, Logan, this is terrible. People who are 30 years old and healthy are coming in here and they're dying. So the first wave of COVID was horrific. We got lucky in that it seemed to mutate and get less and less severe. Let me ask you before we go, at what point did you contract COVID? I'm assuming you did, since you said there are those who have it and those who will get it. How severe was it? And at what point in the pandemic was it?
Well, and again, to be transparent, as far as I know, I did not get COVID. To date, I have not gotten COVID. Now, having said that, there were a couple of times where I was feeling I was going to die in the middle of the pandemic, and I would not test myself, because if I tested myself and I turned positive at the time, they would send you out. Nobody would care for those patients.
Exactly.
So I said, well, they already have COVID. If I have COVID, then it is what it is.
Yeah, you toughed it out. You had a job.
I had no choice.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for your hard work. All of Dr. Varon's bravery and hard work, as well as that of his team at the hospital, is documented in a fantastic book. It's called The Adventures of the COVID Hunter. It tells of his extraordinary experience, his extraordinary journey, spending more than 700 days working, endless hours in order to save lives, and that he did. He had great mortality rates. He was very innovative, and that innovation was a lifesaver. Dr. Varon, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you so much for the interview.
My pleasure. And to the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.